got a lot of the runaround, 400 rejections.
Wow.
I think it was Creative Circle was my agency. Creative Circle, meet with this one particular rep, Tiffany. I'll never forget. She says, for whatever reason in Los Angeles, people believe that creative people, particularly creative people that look like you and I, cannot walk and chew gum. And
Mm.
so the idea that your resume shows an entire career of walking, chewing gum, tap dancing, backflipping, and all of the above successfully, it seems, and still maintaining jobs for years. Either you are a con artist or, they just don't know what to do with it because they can't conceive it. She just kind of took me through the process of where to prioritize that, even in how I speak of myself. And literally a week later, she's like, all right, I know somebody who will understand exactly who you are. You found the person. And, that person was Grammy award winning, capital venture capitalist, tech venture capitalist, millionaire.
Welcome back to another episode of Custom Journeys. My name is Andrew Baines. My co-host Eliseo Iglesias won't be able to join us today, but we still got a really great episode planned for you. Today we got our special guest, Dave Giles. He's a senior product developer for CONVOZ, which is a social media app. We'll kind of talk about that in a little bit, but he's also a musician or an artist. He has a few songs out and he's actually produced some albums as well. But really excited to talk to Dave today. He has a really interesting story, self-proclaimed Forrest Gump of tech. And we'll kind of get into like why I say that. But you're a really great dude. So Dave, thanks for joining me today, man.
Thank you for having me, Drew. I appreciate it, man.
All right, cool, man. I think I actually found you because of CONVOZ. I follow Chamillionaire on social media, and then I somehow one way or another stumbled across your profile, reached out, and I'm so glad that you were able to come on the show today. But I always like to kind of start with the end in mind. So if you can kind of tell us a little bit about what your job is currently at CONVOZ and what you do there in terms of like developing the CONVOZ app.
Yeah, so at CONVOZ, I'm a senior product designer. And so what that basically means is that, with software, honestly, with physical products as well, but in this particular case with software, you have a product that you're building and you have to be able to design essentially what that product looks like. You also have to be able to design what that product is going to do, what that experience is going to feel like for people, and also kind of tell like a user story, a narrative, if you will, of what's going to happen from when they come into the app, where they're going to go, kind of what directions they're going to go in. You get to dictate how they move, how they live in the app, how they exist in it, and do things to try and get them to stay, do things to get them to try and come back. Basically, every single thing you saw in that movie, The Social Dilemma, is actually what is technically happening, just without the guys in the spacesuits around the big console. But yes, that is essentially what we do in the product flow. And as a designer, my job is to visually impact that.
Okay, gotcha. Cool. What's kind of the difference between CONVOZ and some of the other apps that are out there? A lot of people use Instagram. That's kind of like my go-to. But what's the difference between CONVOZ and Instagram or any other social media app?
Yeah, so CONVOZ is largely based upon the idea that in conversation and in real life conversations, there are rules. There's kind of a social contract. I think that the majority of us who, have decent health and facilities, and control of our emotions to a certain extent, there's a bit of a social contract, I think, that we all trying to abide by. And you are upheld to that social contract typically when you're in person, typically when you are face to face with somebody, right? And, however you're prepared, whether you're prepared or not, you arrive as you are in that moment. And so with social media, I think from a technological standpoint, Twitter or Instagram, I guess you asked me about Instagram specifically, but we're always interacting with people's content that has either already been pre-prepared or pre-exists or whatever it may be. But we're interacting with people's content typically that's, I guess, premeditated. And we're having those same arrive as you are gut reactions or, instinctive reactions to premeditated content via Instagram. And so what ultimately that, that can be a joyous place for some people, and that can also be a nightmare for some people. And in an attempt to try and curb the nightmare, CONVOZ tries to kind of center, on, again, creating the social media atmosphere that upholds you to to those, the social contract, so to speak, as much as possible, in those moments of instantaneous, knee-jerk reaction to something that you have consumed on your phone. And so the reason why, again, avoiding the nightmare, what facilitates that nightmare is the anonymity, right? Knowing that I'm texting, essentially. Knowing that I am maybe, again, sending an emoji and that's it, and, take it for what you will, that's it. Or I'm sending a private message, and a thing, and, perhaps I have an avatar that looks like me and lets you know who I am. Perhaps I don't. Perhaps I have a name that tells you nothing about my actual existence and makes it really hard to figure out who I am, but I'm able to still give you a really quick reaction that, I am not necessarily held accountable for. We try to facilitate a space that actually, again, if you are, as we used to say growing up in the hood, I bet you won't say that to my face.
Yeah.
That is essentially the spirit behind the app. And so hopefully then if you take away the room, for the shenanigans in that regard, then you just get to what people want to go online for, which is interaction, honest interaction, healthy interaction, ideally, and communication. Just a way to get out of wherever they are, or broadcast wherever they are, and share that or communicate with somebody else. And we're doing that, but we're centering it around live. And we're also, like, as I said, we're focused on video. So with very little interaction, with text. And so you are who you are, prepared or not, but you're your real self. And hopefully that's a positive experience for folks. We believe that it can be. And part of our game is to kind of make that work for folks every step of the way.
Dope. Yeah, I've used the app quite a bit now. I mean, I really like it. I mean, you guys really do a great job of, like you said, prioritizing human interaction. It's not like you don't have to worry about, like, on Instagram, the bots are like really taking over Instagram right now. Mm-hmm. So like any kind of post you make or anything like that, you got bots, you got people trolling. But on CONVOZ, it really is like a cohesive environment where people are really focused on, like, discussing different ideas, getting to know people, meet people, things like that. So I've enjoyed the app thoroughly. Now I encourage other people to check it out, So, and plus, I mean, you got a really diverse team behind it. You got a black CEO, you got a black senior product designer, and not only that, but it's a great product. So I'm on board for it. So let's get into it, man. So I called you last time we talked. You called yourself the Forrest Gump of tech, man, because you kind of broke down your story of like how you got to where you're at today, and I was like, bro, it's a lot of like twists and turns in here. I didn't say it in the intro, but if anybody goes and finds your LinkedIn page, they'll notice, hey, you got a bachelor's degree in history from the University of Washington, St. Louis. So we kind of got to start there, right? How did you kind of start off?
So I'll censor in that college start, but my journey in tech does start in high school. And, to be brief, there was, I guess, the OG social networking at Black Planet. You could either get on Black Planet and have a profile, or you could have a very expressive page if you could do a little bit of programming. And so, gotcha. I was in a summer camp program that kind of exposed me to some early HTML and some early Java and things like that. Probably, I guess, in, I don't know, 97, 98. So maybe I'm 13 or something like that, junior high. And when I, finally get my hands on a Black Planet page and all that, I'm able to customize it. I'm able to, to freak it and flip it. And that was kind of the initial motivation to even play around, with programming. And then from there, it kind of became a way, like in high school, it was a way to make money, but also to kind of raise my social capital in the circles that I was moving in. I was an artist, but as a visual artist, I mean, I was essentially doing graffiti, but, I was a musician at the time. I was DJing and I was, starting up as a rapper. So um, there was a guy who ran a record pool that I really wanted to impress. And he was like, neighborhood big bro, but was super cool. And I ended up, designing his t-shirts and helping him set up, a web page, very, very much web 1.0, to get his record pool off the ground. But that was kind of the initial foray. And so me wrapping up college with a history degree was really more of a formality and a time sensitive opportunity than a goal. However, I say that while still saying that I'm very much a historian. And that what allowed me to essentially, kind of arrive at a graduation crossroads of not being far enough along in the craft that I was pursuing, but having history degrees history credits by default was because that was what was interesting to me. Basically the storytelling aspect of history and the ability to kind of, again, predict what's going to happen in the future, create profiles and, so on and so forth, pattern recognition, all of that you do with history and with, good storytelling to boot. And so that's something that I've always kind of been passionate about. And I tell people all the time that even right now, I do not use my college degree in a stereotypical way. However, as a product designer, I'm studying every other app. I am a historian of, what's happening on social, what's happening from a trend standpoint, what's happening visually, in mobile interfaces. And, even from a data standpoint, making decisions, the idea of making decisions based upon data, making visual decisions based upon data, is literally, what people do in the study of history. The analytical process in itself. So
your senior product designer for CONVOZ, a dope app, but your background is in history. Can you kind of tell me what was your kind of journey through tech?
So yes, how I then, from that standpoint, coming out with that history degree, ended up here. My first real job out of college was with National Society of Black Engineers. And that comes about because, for one, I'm in the DC area, which was just kind of I graduated and I needed to get out of St. Louis, or else I was going to only be DJing and promoting parties, which is cool, but that's what I was going to be doing in St. Louis if I stayed there at that time. And so
Gotcha.
I went to DC on a whim, really just, change my scenery, kind of put myself in a fight or flight kind of scenario and, make some things happen. And I say first job versus first gig because my first, gig was a job, but it was in the financial services industry during the market, during the beginning of the predatory market, driven housing crash of 2008. And so I was working at a predatory lender, mortgaging and refinancing in suburban Maryland. And so that was the first gig. 6 months into that, I was like, nah, this, I already know, I know what this is. I can't refinance somebody's Section 8 co-op. That's officially, we're doing way too much.
Yeah.
It was savagery in the true sense. And so I land upon NSBE thinking that because I had experience as a student teacher, because I was pursuing an education degree before, kind of falling into my history degree, that me being able to communicate, academically and kind of speak to developing students and also not necessarily having to have the requirements of being a teacher, but just being able to exist in the space of academia, plus working at a Black organization, I could figure it out. And I, get into the space and I find out that, the guy who ends up hiring me, my hiring manager, Dr. Michael Smith, he was, I think it was a mechanical and chemical engineer at Texas A&M, illustrious career. And he initially went to school in Kansas City. He's from Kansas City. And so he pledged Kappa in Kansas City. I pledged Alpha Phi Alpha in St. Louis. My chapter, Alpha Eta, put on a step show for, I guess, going on 30 years, maybe 30 years or more now. No, I think we're at 30 years now, of the Midwest Marchdown, which is the second largest step show in the Midwest, basically. Before Sprite took over Chaos in Chicago, Chaos was the biggest thing. And again, that's Chicago versus St. Louis. So, number two ain't bad in that situation.
Yeah.
And so that was run like a business. We basically, were in the streets promoting it with the party crews. We were in the radio stations. We had a bank account, we're going to local businesses, getting sponsors,
Full-fledged business.
Yeah, off the earnings, giving out, $2,000, $3,000, and $4,000 scholarships to, high school students to go to school, to go to school of their choice, like a full-fledged, business 501c3 situation. And so he, in my interview, after I guess kind of getting me through what the actual job is about, he was like, I see that you ran the march down, and if you ran the march down, you can run a NSBE convention. At the end of the day, we'll figure out the rest. And so that kind of, that for one began what I would really consider to be, I guess, a trend in my career of right situation for you, essentially what is for you is for you. And the person who was intended to recognize what lies beneath the surface, or what lies, just past the title, or just past the, whatever it may be, they'll find you as long as you're doing the right things. And so that kind of became a trend for me. And so, did 3 years at NSBE, had a really good run doing as a program coordinator, created, new structures, the academic pyramid of excellence, which they still use to this day. Increased programmatic involvement, by like 300% in my 3 years. Got to travel around the country. And so I did that for 3 years, was living in Washington, D.C., and was putting a lot more effort into, at the time, an independent music career. And so, had started putting money into, videos and touring and, things like that. And kind of hit a point of, realizing that I was going to probably be in the same job with NSBE for at least another 5 years, before any kind of, significant growth or changes, financially, or, just kind of in terms of professional, like, depth. And then also that for what was starting to happen for me with kind of the creative side of what I did, it wasn't going to be a lot of what I wanted to do in DC outside of things like being like the flyer guy in the club, which I got to do for a little bit. And so the next step was either go back to Chicago, which was not really an option for me at the time, just with like my father's health at the time and like things that were going on financially. And so New York, it was like, I didn't at the time see myself in the South. I didn't know anything about the West. And so it's like, well, I just got to go to New York then. And so I get to New York, and from there I was like, okay, well, I got to figure this out. I'm in New York at that time and thinking about, okay, what skills do I have and what can I do? And I had been making money on the side doing like, flyers, posters, kind of promotional, things like that. As a musician, honestly, I had kind of honed as a result of trying to market music, I had honed an entire kind of cadre of like visual art skills, basically, design, video, production, very mediocre at the time, editing. But that was something that kind of improved organically over time. But the idea of like how to actually produce visuals and how to like bring a team together to, hire a person to do this role, to, this person has this vision, this person has that vision, and, you kind of deck it out or sketch it out the rest of the way. That was something that I knew about already. And so moving around in those kind of creative circles in New York, I started selling that service as, freelance basically. And it was funny. I remember I tried to go down to like, all the retail shops in Soho and kind of had this thing in my head, like, we can go down and work at, one of the cool streetwear shops like Kid Cudi or something like that. And like, meet somebody down there and, everything is going to connect. And at those shops, they're like, nah, like you went to Washington University and like, you were the Association of Black Engineers. Like, I don't think this is for you. And I'm like, I promise it is, And then when I would go down to the design, down to like the agencies, like the creative agencies, they're like, you don't have agency experience or corporate experience, so we can't really do anything for you. So I just kind of independently just kind of beat the streets with, again, creative contacts that I was making. And then over, as people see the stuff you're doing, people who were in corporate jobs in the city who I knew from either back from Chicago or just through the college network, would reach out. So got a chance to do things, for McDonald's, for the Apollo Theater, for a few different Broadway plays that, were happening just kind of through that network. And so basically every 3 months that I came back to the, the agencies, my portfolio just looked more and more valid, so to speak. And at some point they were like, look, you still don't have technically the experience, but we can't deny your work ethic. So, we'll take you on and we'll see what we can do. Not too long after that, Macy's.com calls around Thanksgiving of like 2011. And that was officially my first design job in the industry. In that space, I was kind of like a proofer, an editor, did a lot of like presentation, docs, things like that. But there was just so much to learn in that role, even something that would be deemed annoying, like planning out or archiving every homepage from the prior year and then using that to map out what's coming up in the upcoming year. And then, figure out what can we design on top of this, or what can we tweak about this, or what trend can we like drop into this. That was a part of their process. And so I was the archivist as a part of this job. And it was supposed to be grunt work, basically. That's how they viewed it. But I was the archivist. And so I got to like lay out these presentations and essentially kind of the design education, I guess, that I did not formally have, kind of was forced to undertake through this process. And it was in that role that I started to kind of figure out that, for one, I can now see how people who take creative or media or tech jobs, early on and do not have the perspective that like, oh, this may not be ideal, but this is kind of like a college situation, or this may not be ideal, but this is a stepping stone to this bigger picture, or I'm a cog in this bigger machine, and I might be able to learn some things about it if I can kind of, navigate this little tension over here. I watched a lot of people quit, fall out of paths and kind of immediately go into the space of it's not for me because of some of those kind of early career tensions. And I started to notice that and realize like, okay, you can literally survive in most of these spaces by, for one, being resilient, and for two, figuring out how to kind of glean something from, every single situation. That's not to say that there weren't like really egregious kind of, disrespectful or, even, dare I say racist, scenarios that absolutely, happened during my time in Macy's, but like, and I had to deal with that, legally as well. But
Gotcha.
I was there for 4 years, and I vividly remember kind of having these awareness moments of, yes, my director is disrespectful, or yes, I'm being belittled in certain scenarios, but boy, she really knows her way around the brand. Or boy, like, 10 pixels every time, huh? Oh, okay. Let me just, literally just little things. And I'm like, this, and, for all intents and purposes, this sucks, but I can actually literally pick up all the game that I need to, if I see it as such. And then when it became a point of, okay, now we're crossing certain lines, that's when, you kind of make your adjustments and, you document what you go through and, So, again, in a very organic kind of cosmic way, as things are starting to implode for them on a corporate level, I get the opportunity to go to Essence, reach out from a friend, network, very organic thing. I go in my email and it's an email from, one of my friends that's like, hey, are you looking for a new opportunity? Because we really need, a production designer over at Essence. And I'm like, of course. So the timing of that worked out really well. I want to say too, as well, to their credit, I had just at the time, I remember getting a raise and thinking, and sharing, with my wife, man, this seems like an awesome idea, but, I had worked with other Black businesses before in media and was like, I don't know if they're going to pay me, I don't know. And they paid me and then some. And it wasn't even a question. Like, it literally was not a negotiation. Like, the number wasn't a negotiation at the time. And to benchmark, just so that I think we're talking about going from 72,000 at Macy's to 80,000 at this particular time in my career. And so I was like, yeah, no brainer, so I'm sorry I even doubted you guys, but Essence was an incredible experience because it was one of those, again, these kind of weird moments where your preparation meets your opportunity. And so by being an independent artist, by being somebody who had to figure out how to not get evicted in New York City, while, being laid off essentially from, a gig, I believe I figured out how to, for one, how to multitask, for two, how to kind of master the basics, like making deadlines, so every now and then work the hours that somebody else won't. Now that I'm older, I don't advise that, but as a young person, like, hey, work the hours somebody else won't,
Yeah.
be ready, be there, have solutions when other people don't have solutions. Like, those were just some things that I kind of figured out early that, like, if I can do that in any situation, I'll be valuable. And as a result, got to build a lot of really cool things,
Gotcha.
On the kind of day-to-day peer-to-peer level, but then also on the grandest scale, like Essence Festival and, seeing art, your own art direction in the streets, actually being on stage at Essence Festival, all of that, and so that I was there with them for about 5 years. And that's a trend that I'm also kind of starting to find, is that all of my jobs thus far have had these kind of 3 to 5 year windows, very similar to school. And so I kind of, now look at it like Macy's was undergrad and, Essence was my master's program. And right now working in tech is my PhD. So,
Awesome.
Basically the end of Essence, everything was cool. It was amicable. We were cooking with grease and, I got nominated a couple times for Webbies and, acknowledged as part of the team for the Ad Age A-list, experiential brands, set up a whole podcast network, just like really cool things there. And my wife one day was just like, I'm really tired of cold weather. I'm tired of cold weather. I'm tired of, the pace of New York. I'm tired of what we are getting for what we are paying for. I'm tired of watching gentrification happen month by month to the point of where it's, there's 5 more people in the laundromat, every Saturday. There's 50 more people on the train every morning. There's, 25 more people on the bus. These are the kind, again, we're like, she's a data scientist, through, library science. So yeah, studied like the SQL databases and all this kind of stuff. She's a whole. She might be another episode for you, to be honest.
No, that for sure. That's a bit.
Yeah, like we were nerding out over like the metrics of gentrification in our little Bed-Stuy neighborhood. And, like, we were just like, yo, mathematically, this is going to bust. We got to get out of here.
Yeah.
And so, you know, just from that, you know, kind of set a plan in place of, okay, well, this is the timeline. You know, her thing was to find a job by a certain time. My thing was to, you know, stack the money to a certain point. And at that
Yeah.
time, my music career had transitioned to a space where now no longer independently bootstrapping it, but had a record signed to a label internationally. So actually getting advance money, you know, getting, you know, international bookings, which is, you know, more money. So it being something that is like a viable, actual, you know, stream of income and business at this point,
Hmm.
which at that point, you know, we kind of, the South was an option. New Orleans in specific, you know, to get some land and some property and just kind of get, you know, to our roots a little bit. And New Orleans went super red, you know, just in the wake of Trump and, you know, Blue Lives Matter bills and all kind of stuff like that. So
Yeah.
um, we were like, it's not going to be an option for how we're going to live our lives. So, you know, California ends up being it. So we go to California. It took a really long time for me to, you know, land a gig. I went through all kind of microaggressions in the job hunting process. Hey, you know, your portfolio is too dark. You should lighten it up. I remember then changing the background on my website from like a darker tone to like completely white and like putting like pastel like overlays on. And I was like, how's this? And he responded, you know, respectfully and cordially, but you know, he never called back.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Um, got a lot of the runaround, 400 rejections.
Wow.
To you know, to be honest, was glad that we had some solid savings, and my freelance game came in handy. You know, I was able to do some work for a senatorial candidate in the Bronx, and you know, a few other entities that kind of kept us afloat. And finally, meet with this. I think it was Creative Circle was my agency. Creative Circle. Meet with this one particular rep, Tiffany. I'll never forget. She says, you know, for whatever reason in Los Angeles, people believe that creative people, particularly creative people that look like you and I, cannot walk and chew gum. And
Mm.
so the idea that your resume shows an entire career of walking, chewing gum, tap dancing, backflipping, and you know, all of the above successfully, it seems, you know, and still maintaining jobs for years. Um, Either you are a con artist or, you know, they just don't know what to do with it because they can't conceive it. And so, you know, she kind of gave me this vision of let's remove as much, basically kind of my, you know, my extras, my, you know, animation, you know, video, like the things, these other crafts that I know how to do, you know, having voiceover work, model work. She's like, throw it all out. She's like, let's hone in on the things that have basically either made you a lot of money or, you know, given you some stability professionally, which
Yeah.
still included music at that point, you know. But again, you know, she just kind of took me through the process of where to prioritize that, even in how I speak of myself. And literally a week later, she's like, all right, I know somebody who will understand exactly who you are. We found the person. And, you know, that person was Grammy Award winning, you know, you know, venture capitalist, you know, tech venture capitalist, millionaire. And so that in itself has just been a really powerful moment because when I never felt out of my league, and I think he noticed that. But not because, you know, the tech space was necessarily something I had navigated it through and through, but more so that at this point in my career, I had kind of arrived at an understanding that in every single field, we are literally succeeding with the same practices, empathy-based practices. And, you know, we are like flying and dying by that. Everybody, you know, whether you are teaching, whether you are, you know, developing, whether you are designing, whether you are, you know, in construction, like empathy-based processes. If you ain't asking questions, if you don't understand the history of what's going on, if you don't know the temperature of the room, if you don't understand the cultural context to why we're even trying to solve the problem that we're trying to solve, you won't be successful. And so that's something that I believe in now. And I'll never forget, one of the things that Cam kind of told me early on, he said, in just full transparency, basically, it will be extremely hard for you to get into tech, and I had been a finalist in all kind of things and been, rejected. And, people just kind of at that last part being like, I get it, I see it, but I don't get it. Or saying, I get it, but why? And they couldn't either maybe believe my why, or I don't know. And so he told me it's going to be really hard for you. He's like, from who you are, how you're presenting, and then also the diversity of what you're bringing to the table. All of that, some people's going to confuse, some people's going to threaten. So it's going to be a hard road. And he's like, I'm bringing you in at a certain level. Trust me, stick with me for 6 months, do well for 6 months, do well for a year in this space. We grow, as a company, and, I would love for you to grow with us, but I assure you, any and everything that you want to do in this industry will be at your disposal within a year. It will be like night and day. And it kind of felt a little crazy for him to say that to me, as he was taking me on. But at the same time, I kind of heard it less like an employee and more like a little brother, or like a nephew, and again, as you do, as kind of through history, through my personal history as a professional, I kind of took that as, okay, I'm going to trust that, and I'm gonna follow that, to a certain, extent. And as we went through this journey, I started to see very quickly that, outside of just being a brilliant guy, I mean, Cam is the kind of person that you run through a brick wall for. His dedication to people, to just caring for people, for caring for us as people beyond our actual technical ability, but also being able to drive, all kinds of, greatness out of our technical ability. And also for himself to be there in the mix of what's going on and kind of putting his own, like his presence, his sauce in it every step of the way. And so that kind of became a thing where I'm like, okay, no, I will literally run through a wall for this guy. And, in the last, since the pandemic hit, I mean, I'm not saying this to like brag or anything like that, but I'll just say this. The names of the companies that I have rejected or declined, or declined to take a second call with, or declined to take a call with, or like just completely said, hey, check in with me next year, or whatever,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, like, and even in this tech space, navigating weird things, like with certain people in the way that they will reach out, realizing like, I don't even know if you actually are trying to like hire me per se, or if you just want to get me talking about the products because you're already watching the product and you want to, snake the product. Like, so there's even that. And so that loyalty kind of kicks in that space. And, I've had moments where I've, just straight up told him like, hey, just so y'all know, Mark is looking, just so y'all know, like, you name it, literally, is looking. So for one, he's right. He was absolutely right. His prophecy has definitely come true. And I couldn't be happier where I am, so, I'm really trying to really, make good on his vision, make good on our collective vision. I think that one of the dopest parts about the team is that all of us, the vision is not kind of like this is just something that, you're working for, but it's like, this is I feel like everybody in the room at their core has the same belief about just what social media should be, could be. And so it really feels like this is all of our baby. It's all of our project, so yeah, I tell people, I'm like, hey, I got KPIs I'm trying to hit. Like, don't talk to me. I'm sorry. Like, literally, so that is it's just been a really awesome experience, man. And I'm excited to kind of see where it goes and to really, again, kind of work in service of this ideal. Like, just like in essence, like I got to work in service of the ideal of, the empowerment and the centering of Black women, And right now, seeing, this mogul, kind of blaze trails in tech, as a Black man, like I want to be the engine behind that, in whatever way I can. So
That's a really dope story. One of the things I love that you said is like empathy-based processes, right? I think right now I'm like I don't know if it's like, I guess I call myself like a Gary V disciple, like Gary Vaynerchuk.
okay.
He's real big into like empathy and kindness. I think a lot of times that's what's really missing in the world, just in general, in
Mhm.
terms of like a lot of problems we face. But then not only that, but from like a product or a service-based standpoint, like if you're trying to make something, you want to have the end user in mind and be empathetic to like what are the challenges, what do they face, what problems do they have, and how is your product solving that. And then number two, I think like right now tech is really big, right? And a lot of people, they may not have that traditional bachelor's degree in computer science or whatever, or data science or machine learning, whatever the case may be. But I think a lot of us have skills that we've gained throughout our career that are transferable. And I think a lot of us have opportunities, if they're not already taking them, to like take on projects where they can expand their skill set that and then transfer those skills on to another position. So I think what I love about your story is that whether you were like the flyer guy or working at Macy's where you had to deal with like racism, microaggressions, or whatever, or working at Ebony, each step along the way, you've always looked for, hey, how can I sharpen my skill set, my toolbox, add more tools to my toolbox, and then have better opportunities in the future. That's kind of like my little like notes or summary of what I was kind of
Yeah,
taking notes over here. But it's really impressive, man. I'm enjoying what you've been able to accomplish and what you've been able to do, and walking
thank you,
while
brother.
chewing gum. We're complex people, bro. So I mean, I love that. I love that you get a chance to show like all your different talents and everything like that. Because I think a lot of times people do just try to fit us in a box. Like, hey, you're an engineer.
Right,
You only like math and science. You don't like art or music or anything else like that. And
right.
Black people in particular are very complex people. We have a lot of different interests, and we can adapt to different situations. So I think it's amazing that you um, displayed that throughout your career and everything like that. Correct me if I'm wrong. So at CONVOZ, were you like originally bought on, and I guess it's kind of your role now, still currently as a UI UX designer. Is that like
Yes.
your intro? Okay.
Yep.
Talk to me briefly about like the differences between like UI UX and like a front end developer. So I know like front end developers, they traditionally do like CSS, React, all that good
Mhm.
stuff. In your words, what's kind of the difference between the two, and what
Right.
skills might you need for UI UX also?
So UI UX is essentially touch, what you touch, what you interact with versus how you feel about it. Interaction is essentially, as you know, you're touching it, you move what it looks like, what color it is, how, all of that. And the experience is essentially how that impacts you. So you, it's interesting. And I get that sometimes companies have a large enough, talent pool to be able to say, you do UI, you do UX. But it's the kind of thing that it goes hand in hand. Essentially, if you're doing UI without actually being a part of the UX flow or being a part of the UX process, then you're kind of doing paint by numbers. No disrespect to anybody, like, not to kind of trivialize it, but essentially that flow is, you kind of have this roadmap and you're designing according to it. But in the UI UX flow, you have to understand what impact your decisions are going to have on people. And that can either come through the support of a manager. My manager, Alex, he is very much, the person who kind of, at this point in our process, um, and I analogize it as goes and kind of slays the dragon of like solving, this is a new idea from social. What can we take from it? Let's throw out the bones, let's throw out the teeth. Like, what can we take from it and use for ourselves? And then we figure out how to do that together. And then, he kind of tells me, okay, well, this can go here, this can go there. And, we get it from there. But that is, yeah, that's the difference. It's, what you see, what you touch, and then how you feel about it.
So the next question, what's typically like a day in a life like for a UI UX designer? Like walk me through that. You walk in, well, it's COVID, so I don't even know if y'all work virtually or not, but I guess
Yeah,
let's say the day
this is my
starts.
house.
Yeah. So walk me through like a day in the life as a UI UX designer. How does that typically play out?
Yeah. A day in the life, and mind you, I mean, my day in the life might even be a little bit different than the average, UI UX designer. But essentially, I I start my design day off with social, actually. On social, and then reading articles about things that are happening just around, across tech. We share articles in our company Slack. And so in that, kind of seeing what's happening, what's the talk, what's interesting, what has crumbled, and what has skyrocketed. And then from there, interacting with social, my personal social channels, basically.
Mm,
And in that, either trying to accomplish, creating some kind of content, or just like consuming what's going on, and, assessing. Throughout the course of that process, I'm screenshotting, new pop-ups that I see, new takeovers that happen, new overlays that happen as my phone kind of starts coming to life, and I'm getting banking notifications, and, email things, and, you know, um, alerts on the upcoming, Clippers game tonight, and all of that. I start seeing, basically, I've told myself to look for new interfaces, new ideas, different ways to do things. And so I'm screen grabbing all of that. I have a little app that I use called Arena, and it's REARE.NA. Arena is essentially a mood boarding app, and I use it for about 5 different applications, and 5 different,
mm,
like, I guess, streams of creativity. But I keep a UI UX mood board, and basically that's my way of not just having a glut of things on my phone that I forget about, but I just kind of throw it up there, and I can share. My team has access to it if ever they want to, and I can always kind of come back to it and pull down ideas from that. So then at some point, I shift out of that and go into whatever I was working on. Typically, something has come down from my product manager, a new idea that has been discussed in the larger product meeting the day prior. And now he has taken it, broken it down into specs, and either done like a mock of it, or, has specs, and we've talked about it at, the day prior on Meet, like you and I are talking right now. And then I am, going through that designing, typically starting from an existing file, trying to pull in as many of the kind of native things that I've already been using, so that I don't mess up, my continuity. I use Sketch. I used to use Adobe XD in my past life. I still, if I, randomly take a freelance thing here and there, if they ask me to use Adobe XD, I kind of tap in for that. But I've totally fallen for Sketch and Zeppelin. Um, and so, yeah, that's it. I'm kind of drafting it up, rushing to have it ready for stand up, so that I can at least, be able to share it or show it, or, acknowledge that it's done. Um, get through stand up, talk about what I've done, what I'm doing. We usually have a little product talk afterwards. That can either be us trying to solve something. It can literally be an observation of, did you see what's up? This user did last night. Man, I feel like this is an example. And this is why I talk about how tapped in Cam is. This is an example of, and Casino too, our product officer. Let me not discredit him
mm.
either. This is an example of what we don't want. Or this is an example of what we do want. How can we funnel them, in this direction or that direction? We're brainstorming. I'm going to that mood board to pull down ideas. Hey, I just saw this on there. Alex is like, well, we just Clubhouse. This happened on Clubhouse, and we can kind of learn from this mistake, and things like that.
Yeah.
We break. We come out of that, get back to sketch. And personally, I try to do things in like 90-minute increments. So even when we were in the office, I always tried to take like 5 minute breaks at 90-minute increments. Even if it meant just going for a walk, stopping to then go and manage personal emails for like 30 minutes or something like that, or whatever it is. But just to give myself the ability to, like, 90 minutes is enough time to really make a dent, in my opinion,
Yeah, it
um,
is.
in a problem, and a solution, solving a problem, I should say, and developing a concept. It may not be enough to get you to the promised land, but it's enough to kind of outline, sketch where you want to go. Sometimes in that break gives you that clarity to get the human perspective, shake things up a little bit, not get stuck in your brain or not get stuck in your own processes. Mind you, this is advice from somebody with ADHD. So, I'm not prescribing this as a fix for everybody, but this is just
Yeah.
how a disordered thinker handles this. But yeah, and so I try and do my projects in that kind of. So when I take that break, maybe it's going to eating and then consuming some social there to kind of figure out what's going on. I try and take lessons from real life. So when I hop on my Peloton, like to get my workout in, I'll notice a new pop up and I'm like, ooh, that's an incentive, or that's cool how they made me feel good about this thing that I accomplished. Let me take note of that real quick. When I'm driving, it's such a part of my life now. When I'm driving, and I realize every time I get to this intersection, I never know if I'm gonna turn at the next intersection or if I need to turn right here. What
Yeah.
could be done differently about this sign to make this make sense?
Mm.
I'm solving those riddles all day
Yeah.
long. As a kind of like as my elders used to do, doing my crossword puzzle to stay sharp. Like that's same idea, you know. So
Cool.
that's how I kind of keep sharp, how I stay tapped into what's going on, and then how I also have just enough fuel left to create and solve some problems too.
It's dope. I love that you have like such an artistic component that goes with it. And I talk to some students all the time, and they're like, I don't think I want to do STEM or tech because I don't want to do math. And it's like, yo, wait, time out. You can do tech and have like an artistic a skill set and apply
Yeah.
that to tech. And I mean, I think that's really key from listening to you and your story. If you have to give some advice to somebody who uh, either doesn't want to go to college, or let's say they went to college and went a completely separate route, what advice would you give them for how to become a UI/UX designer without a college degree?
Um, look up the workshops. You have to learn. You have to absolutely learn the language. So look up the workshops. They have I sent stuff to some of the guys back home. My brother who has a record. Like links to like the Google. The new Google workshop series that they have.
Oh, certification programs.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
yeah.
yeah, I saw those. Oh yeah, yeah.
Those things,
All right.
they're making them accessible, and simply put, that distinction, that designation in this current climate could literally be the difference between you getting, noticed and not getting noticed. If especially if you're not coming from a traditional background, consume, read, like read articles, listen to Twitter. I know that sounds kind of crazy to say listen to Twitter, but I have recently kind of tapped into this awareness that Twitter Spaces, there's a lot of foolishness on any of these kind of talk only platforms, so to speak. But
Yeah.
for instance, people will ask me, how do you know what's going on with Web3, and like how'd you get hip to NFTs? And I'm like, I listen to Twitter Spaces. There's
Gotcha.
actually a lot of people just talking about the ideas, and you can in that over time, don't take any of it as gospel, but literally hear the tone in which people speak of the terms that they're saying. So not just you can read Scrum, you can read Kanban on a website, but how
Mm,
does it sound when it rolls off somebody's tongue? What emphasis are they putting behind those words? That tells you how important those words are in your own, interview process, in your own, whether or not I should actually really dive into this and figure out what it is. Also, something that I do that may not be for everybody because everybody may not necessarily be social in this way, but I try not to ignore any curiosity. Um, if I'm at a music festival with my family and I notice that the wristbands are really interesting and I've never seen anything like them before, I will ask the security guy if he seems like he's not, crazy. Hey, I've never seen that wristband before. I've done events, but I've never seen that wristband. What is this different? Is this new? And you will likely get, again, everybody that's a professional, everybody that is doing a good enough job to get paid for what they do, likely, I can't, it's not a guarantee, but likely has a wealth of information and experience underneath whatever you see. And so,
Gotcha.
you know, the reason why I'll do that, I'm genuinely curious about it or why it's different. But then I end up getting a whole lesson that may not apply to what I have to do the next day. But then when I'm going about, these processes and trying to make sense of something that I just read in this new realm of, software, I have one more analogy in the real world, one more analogy in the, the physical or the digital world that I can apply to make sense of it all. And so it's staying educated, it's staying curious. Like I said, try and get, if you're not on a roadmap, like I was on a design roadmap, so because I had officially kind of established myself as a design professional, that was part of my leverage. If that's not necessarily your roadmap, then I think certifications and, some of these alternative education formats like the boot camps and things like that, I think those can be worthwhile. I also feel like create the things that you want to get paid to do.
Mm,
So what
mm.
that means is, for there are certain, we all know there are certain things that people pay us to do or that people have paid us to do without question, without hesitation or whatever. And there are certain things that, we want to do that we may not get paid to do yet, or we want to figure out how to do it. We want to, and I tell people all the time, don't, well, don't. I don't necessarily put a lot of effort into creating projects based around what people pay me to do. I do the work that people pay me to do, and then I experiment with the things that people don't pay me to do. And what that shows in my experience is intention. People then see that and say, for one, oh, you're pursuing this, so you care about it. Well, let me actually start to take stock of the fact that you care about it, because at some point I may have some information or a contact that's going to open that up for you when I see what I need to see to see that you got this figured out. But then also the process of learning is oftentimes how you actually, like, that's where the mastery comes in at. Somebody putting it in front of you and telling you this how you do it. You oftentimes learn how to do it how somebody told you how to do it. Teaching yourself how to do something requires you to basically take in the information and then have enough comprehension to regurgitate it. And so that process, while difficult and challenging and not for everybody, is absolutely a way to kind of arrive at a place of mastery or of just application faster sometimes than you would in the space of instruction.
Yeah, that's powerful, man. I love that because I think that really tells people to take ownership of their own career and not necessarily just wait for the opportunity to do what your dream job may be, but actually go out there and create it and experiment with different things and then see what you can develop. And in the end, people will
Yeah.
take notice of that. So I think that's really powerful. One quick follow-up question about that. You said that you were like on a design roadmap. What do you mean by that? Like, are you talking about like in terms of like you found an agency that helped place you at different design positions, or what do you mean by that?
No, just to say that, again, and kind of contextualizing, your crafts into, or compartmentalizing your crafts into things you get paid to do and things that, you don't
Gotcha.
get paid to do yet. In my life up until that point, music was something that I was just now at that point breaking even to do. Like, otherwise I had been paying
Uh,
to do music, but design was something that people had been paying me to do. And
okay.
so that's why I say, I guess, on the design roadmap is that I had a career that, regardless of, um, how you feel about, excuse me, what I create per se, or regardless of what you feel about my, I don't know, education, background, so to speak, I still have an experience that can't be taken away in the design space. And so that's kind of what I'm saying, is that, like, inspired, basically I kind of created my resume as a designer up to that point, to where I believe that is the thing that allowed me to arrive to not be sent away immediately, when applying
Gotcha.
for, tech jobs without an actual computer science degree.
Tech is really booming right now, and there's a lot of different opportunities financially, and not only just from a salary standpoint, but then also from an opportunity to have equity in your company that you're working for. Can you kind of speak in terms of like what kind of opportunities financially or travel that you've been afforded by working in the tech industry?
Yeah. So I in transitioning from essence from media to tech, I went from earning 92,000 in salary in New York City. 92,000 plus $18,000 in overtime. So that can kind of give
Mm,
you a context of how media works, the amount of overtime
demanding.
that you have to do to get, yeah. So I was earning 110,000 when I left Brooklyn, and that was kind of my bar. And I knew that even though technically my salary was 92, in my mind, if my labor is worth this much, then the goal should be to basically get a job where I can, within normal hours, generate that value at
Yeah.
minimum. And so I kind of set 110 as my my bar in for LA. And what I found was that most of the jobs that were being presented to me were either, if they were a proper, like a truly kind of vetted, like, product designer level, they were starting at about 110. And if I was in situations where people were basically trying, kind of putting me in a probationary space and kind of
Yeah.
saying, you can be this until you get to there, or would you consider this until you get to there? They were offering things like 85 and, like, 90, 95. And when I first got, to LA, I was like, well, I'll do that for a couple of months, but, I'm going to try and push it up, and not that I expected them to push it up, but I was going to figure out how to run it up, with my own hustle. But either way, so 110 was what I was looking at, making that transition. At CONVOZ, I came in at 110. And one of the things that, my employer told me was that this is essentially the bottom of the market. But as I mentioned before, stay with us, grind with us, like, let's hit some marks and stay afloat. Let's, kind of keep our, stay alive on our roadmap, and, we'll get where we need to be. And let me see, I am at 2 years I hit 2 years as of October. So I think just shy of my first year, um, my salary went up to 125,000. Um, from a share standpoint, I actually don't remember the exact number. It's less than 1%, but I do have equity in the company as well.
Dope.
And when I got my raise, I also got an increase in shares too.
Awesome. Yo, man, I appreciate the transparency because I think there's some kids somewhere that's like, I talked to some kids here in Houston, and they live in a neighborhood where the median household income is $30,000 per
Yep,
household. I
yep,
try to tell them, like, yo, your life can change drastically if you
yep.
make certain decisions and go this route. So thanks for putting that out there, and then especially that equity piece. I got like a ton of other questions I want to ask you, but I got one last question before I let you go. I appreciate you taking the time out to talk to me. So
Mhm.
our ending question that we always ask people is like our big picture question, infinity gauntlet question is what we call it.
All
Um,
right.
so in terms of like policy change or a change that you can make with people or anything like that, the question we like to ask people is if you could snap your finger and at an instance you would be able to increase the number of Black and Latino students or people that pursue STEM or tech careers, what change would you implement at the snap of a finger?
to facilitate that, or to
Yeah,
make that
to
possible?
get more Black and Latinos into tech or into STEM.
Mm, mm. Wow. I would, if I could, with a snap of a finger, I would either establish either like significant increases in funding, or just the quantity of community-based programming that makes it very clear, very straightforward, and even broadcast media in that space as well. That makes it very what you're doing essentially. But just give me like 50 more views, man. Like, and I say that not that I want to dilute your reach, but more so, I think what makes this stuff seem so impossible is that if we know about it, we don't have the terminology. Like I said earlier, we're all doing the
Yeah.
same things. We just don't always have the same vocabulary, right?
Yeah.
So we either don't have the terminology to go with it, or we don't understand how, I'm not going to say simple, but how mundane some of these concepts actually are. When I started to make sense of what product design was, I was like, wait a minute. So, and just bear with me with the translation here.
No, I got
But
you.
I'm like, so, going from like marketing design, communication design, let's say, not marketing design,
Yeah.
going from communication design, where you have to create to meet the pace of communication, and that's it. But that is your urgency, is the pace of the communication, the pace of the message that you're trying to get out. And so in that, there's very little room for thoughts about accessibility, there's actually not that much room for empathy. I think there's some really, there's revolutionary designers who have made the field what it is because they fought for that. But there's very little empathy, you know what I'm saying, in the pace of communication design from a professional standpoint. But product design is literally somebody saying, hey, to actually do this well, you have to be in sync with every other part of this product. You have to know what's happening in the world around you. You have to understand it enough to apply it. You have to be able to take the time to actually do that. And then we have to facilitate, a schedule, a time frame, a game even, right? To like add value to what we're creating. Like we're going to create our own value system to prioritize it, to organize our thoughts. So in tech, you basically get paid a bonus to take your time to get it right. Whereas in media, you get paid less to work way faster and way harder to meet the speed of communication. And
Mm.
just those types of understandings, like if I'm 12-year-old me and I hear that, I'm like, oh, well, no, I don't want to rush. I don't want to rush and just be throwing stuff out there. You mean to tell me? So what do I have to do to take my time, to get paid more to take my time? And I say that again, very respectfully.
Yeah.
Roadmaps are fast. I'm not out here sitting back, crossing my legs and, sipping tea and chilling. But when I say taking my time, going through the processes that allow you to actually like get an empathetic perspective on what and why you're doing what you're doing. And
Awesome.
so just that, dumbing it down, that, democratizing that information, I need that to happen on a wide scale. I need a Sesame Street type show that breaks down, these tech
Mm.
concepts at the simplest level,
I love that idea, by the way.
you know?
That's dope. I love that. Cool. Yeah, man. Dave Giles, man. It's been a pleasure, bro. You really I can really see the knowledge and the passion within you. And I'm so
Thank you,
thankful
man.
that you came on the platform to share some of that. And then not only that, but then also the inspiration. Like I think a lot of kids, 17, 18, I remember I thought I had to have everything figured out. And like just hearing your journey of like, hey, you went through different twists and turns along the roadmap to get to where you're at, but you're not even at the end yet, but you found success along the way. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you sharing that with people. I think that'll definitely resonate with people. um I
Thank
don't
you,
want to
man.
hold you up too long because I know you got another engagement after this, but Any last minute questions or thoughts or closing statements you want to make before we close the show out?
Yes. Lead with love. Lead with love. Do your best to be empathetic. If for whatever reason, due to your upbringing, your environment, or just the state circumstances that you are in, empathy is a very major task and labor, then take on empathetic processes like asking questions, like having conversations, like you know just paying attention to what things might possibly look like from somebody else's perspective, and you will absolutely achieve success in whatever it is that you want to do. Beyond that, just be intentional. Start to think about the end goal. Even if you don't necessarily know what it looks like, I can say for myself, a significant portion of what I'm doing didn't exist when I was a kid. So I can't actually say that this was necessarily a dream, that, it was whatever. But I do know that there was a time when I was 15 where I said, I want to use all of these creative skills in a way that gets me paid more than, what I see my dad making as a social worker. And that, in a way where no other kid feels the way I feel, not knowing how this stuff works and not being able to get on an internet or get a book that tells me how to do it. And so those are my goals, as a 15-year-old. And that I can say I'm absolutely doing. So just be intentional, be humble, be consistent, be honest, and everything else truly, those things are sinking. Yeah. Things will start to fall in place.
Dope. Man, I love it. Yeah, bro, I'm gonna have to get you on IG Live, man, because I got a ton of questions for you, man. But
Yeah.
thanks again for making yourself available. I really appreciate it.
Man.
Yeah.
I appreciate your vision, man. I appreciate, you seeing, the layers and, seeing the connection. And I think, again, that's important. When I talk about the kind of breaking it down on a nuclear level, like you being able to see at the core, be kind of what's there beyond my resume, or I guess beyond my education and things like that, seeing what's at the core, that perspective is, I think, what is going to make tech something that everybody wants to do. When they start to figure out, it's really regular people. Wearing my hair in certain styles has been intentional at this point.
I love it.
I had locks in high school. I went to college. I cut it off. I had the little, the perfectly cropped,
Fade.
little curly fro. Very, very, very different,
Yeah.
energy. And then when I started to realize, no, I've arrived in a way, not made it, but arrived.
Yeah.
One of my lines in one of my songs is, you made it when they see you how you came. And that meaning that you're going to go through phases where you show up and people are like, yo, you're dope. But if you did this a little bit differently, you'd be great. Or have you thought about not doing what you're doing at all and just being somebody else? People will do that.
Wow.
But there's a point when people start being like, hey, can you show up and do the exact thing that you do? We will pay you to do the thing that you do and that nobody else does. We really need you to do that.
Yeah.
And that feeling of that's when you are arriving as you are. And when I started to feel okay, unless I really get irresponsible here, I'm in this industry and nobody's gonna take me out of design. When I was working in the timing building, I'm like, shoot, let me get these locks, let me go around, let me fade the sides, get the warrior knot up at the top. I'm gonna let y'all know every day. There will be no mistake. Yes, I will have on my collar shirt with my Jordans. Yes, you'll see my little gold chain pop out every now and then. You will have, and to the point where, not that it's even performative, but it's so that when I would walk past the brothers in the blue time ink uniform sweeping and mopping, it's me and you, we the same, bro. All you got to do is just, get in this, figure out how to get in this room, get this knowledge, come talk to me. You know what I'm saying? Any of it, we are all the same. And so that has been an intentional thing. It's at this point, I'm trying to actually give off the impression that yo, I am of you, I'm of the people, and we can do all of this stuff. So
dope. Ultra black in the corporate setting, man.
You feel me?
Thinking of Nas, man. All right, awesome. Yo, man, before we go real quick, plug your we didn't even get a chance to talk about your music. Just tell the people real quick how they can find you and what platforms they can find you on musically.
Absolutely. So you can find me on any streaming platform. I do a lot of. I've recently done a lot of feature work in the dance music space internationally under my given name, Dave Giles II. Giles is that last name, and the second, the little two eyes with the Roman numeral. You can usually find me on that, and then also I'm a part of a group called Dave and Sam, spelled Dave plus Sam, trying to change it from Sam and Dave enough to not get sued. And we are signed to a record label in London called Defected Records, which is distributed through Warner. So, we have a really, really solid fan base out there in Europe, and the future's looking bright. So, Dave and Sam,
Dope.
Dave Giles II, it's all on streaming. You'll find it.
Dope. Yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I highly recommend you guys go check that out. And then also thank you all for tuning in for this episode. It's been a pleasure, Dave, once again. Thank you all for watching. Again, this is Custom Journeys, and we're out. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.